Hello, my name is Chloe Folan, and the topic of today's video is like that. Initiation is a very broad topic, so there will be other videos that I'll create around this particular topic, but to keep videos short, I can really only pinpoint certain areas of that topic at a time and commit to just one area of that topic, just to keep things shorter and a little bit straight to the point. So the first thing I'd like to say is, if you are sitting down to watch this video and you happen to be, reviewing it, I'll ask that you do watch this video more than once, and maybe some of my other videos, before forming an opinion around what I am or am not saying. And as the saying goes, don't make assumptions about what I'm saying. If you're unsure over something I've mentioned or said, email me. It'll take me a few days to get back to you. But if you want clarity on what I have meant or have not, feel free to email me. But before making any type of comment or opinion, take some time to do some personal investigation to what I'm about to talk about. What I would also like to highlight is me creating a video pointing out where there's been some harmful misappropriation over terminology and harmful glamorization around what initiation is or is not. Me creating this type of video, considering this is my area of expertise, it's no different to a proper builder or engineer sitting down and creating a video around the harm that cowboy builders create, because like that, we all know of incidences. There's been plenty of them here in Ireland over when someone says there's something they're not, lies on their CV, or takes money for things they can't do. Cowboy builders, we all know in every single country there's stories of horrible things that can happen if you get involved with what's known as cowboy builders rather than going to a proper builder or an engineer. Now, that's not to say that there still can't be issues there, but at least, when someone is a proper builder or engineer, they've at least tried to do all of the training and study and gone through all the levels of expertise they need to do it better. And at least you've done the right thing by going to somebody who is a properly qualified builder. So look, I know we could talk about that all day, but essentially that's what I'd like to explain about this video. Another way of looking at a perspective of why I've created this video, and I do have relatives who are very prominent in the arena of health and fitness. They would be dealing with people every day who would be coming into them who have had instructions from people who don't know what they're talking about over how to use gym equipment, and they might have hurt themselves or pulled a muscle or something like that. So in other words, do try to see what I'm about to discuss from my point of view, meaning I deal with this on a daily and weekly basis with people coming to me who've had people lie to them in really insidious ways over being, Buddha when they're not, making claims over being a 7th degree initiate, which in proper terminology means Buddha, or claiming that they're at the same spiritual level of Jesus Christ and they've been through the 4th renunciation initiation and have not. I have people come to me who've unfortunately fallen afoul of people that misappropriate themselves like this. So essentially, the video I'm creating today is no different than a health and fitness expert creating a video appealing to the public over how someone should work with you responsibly in a gym. that you should never be just stuck on a treadmill randomly, meaning height, weight, measurements, current fitness, maybe a bit of a fitness test to see where you are with your fitness levels before getting into a big exercise program, or starting you off on some dietary advice and lighter exercise before putting you on weights and things of that nature. So what I'm about to discuss is actually how do I put this? What initiation is and is not, and what the markers are for them. And essentially, you don't have to be clairvoyant. That's the other side of this. I have people say to me all the time, but Chloe, you're clairvoyant. You can straight away see someone's point of development in huge detail. But here's the thing. You can see it in someone's behavior. You can see it in what they write. You can see it in how they speak. And this is what I meant in one of the other videos that I'll create a link to, where I said one of the number one markers of a proper, decent, enlightened teacher, or anyone anywhere near some form of enlightenment, is number one, they don't talk about themselves. They don't mouth off about themselves going, look at me, I've had my 4th initiation and this is what happened to me. And look at me, I've had my 6th or 7th initiation and look at what I got. Look at how great my life is after that initiation. First of all, if you're dealing with someone where they want to make it very public and very obvious to you, they want you to know how high up on the path they are, by virtue of that type of behavior and wanting to get it out there publicly that that's how ascended they are, by virtue of doing that, they are nowhere near where they claim to be on the ascension path. And here's why, and you don't need to be clairvoyant to spot it. When it comes to the proper spiritual initiations, so to be clear, I'm not talking about the type of initiations that are man-made or woman-made, people created. I'm not talking about attunements. I'm not talking about ceremonies and rites that people would create for prayer and things of that nature. The initiations I'm talking about are the initiations that hierarchy give you based on where you are within your evolutionary development on physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual levels. You either receive those initiations or you don't. And those types of initiations that I'm talking about, where it's not about anyone else's involvement, it's the initiations that you receive by virtue of the deep, proper spiritual journey that you're undertaking and that you're involved in. Number one, those initiations are rare. And those initiations deeply, deeply transform your bodies, meaning physical, emotional, mental, spiritual. The aura layers, the chakras, where you are with building the rainbow bridge, the Antakarana, you become so deeply transformed that ego vanishes. So the reason why a proper enlightened spiritual teacher or someone anywhere near some form of enlightenment, the reason why they wouldn't mouth off about themselves and the initiations that they think they've had and all of the amazing gains that they've received, that's hyper commercialization of initiation, that's hyper glamorization. So number one, that's proof right there that proper initiation isn't happening, because it has nothing to do with personal gain in a Western commercialized sense. Nothing. And number two, those types of very deep initiations transform and dissolve ego. So someone publicly going, I've had this initiation, I've had that initiation, and look what happened to me, and, you know, going off on one over their narrative, over these initiations they think they're having, which by virtue of what they're describing, they're not. You also can tell they're not, because that's ego. That's spiritual narcissism. It really is. And once again, if you take off the layers of glamour of who's talking about themselves like that, if you take that out of your head and just read what's written by people doing that and saying that and writing books about themselves like that, if you take out the glamour and just read it on face value, spiritual narcissism, spiritual narcissism, spiritual narcissism. And if they really were going through proper deep initiations, that wouldn't be happening, because there would be no ego. So that's what I mean. It's not about being aware of proper language or how you do or don't talk on your ascension pathway. It's a behavior and vibration of words that come through someone who is enlightened. An enlightened person who is properly integrating and dissolving ego under the light of the soul doesn't mouth off over how ascended they are, or what they get, or how wonderful their life is after each of the initiations they've had. I'm trying to illustrate the paradox here. Someone who's further along on the spiritual pathway, to word it that way, and if they really were, ego would become so dissolved, they just wouldn't talk like that. They'd be so soul infused. That would not be the language that they would use. They wouldn't want to speak like that. They wouldn't be able to speak like that, because ego would be so dissolved. And while people sometimes might say to me, oh, Chloe, just let people off, it's not that, of course, because I fully understand, you don't and can't control people. Do you know what I mean? But I'll say it again, the whole thrust of this video is the same way an engineer has a right to create a video warning the public over the markers of how you do and do not hire a builder to avoid cowboy builders. The same way a health and fitness expert has every right to create a video going, look, when you go into a gym or connect with someone for health and fitness, this is how you should be spoken to. These are the proper types of assessments that should be done. So that's all I'm doing here. I'm not creating separatism. I'm pointing out harmful fallacies that a lot of people do get sucked into, unfortunately, because here's the other thing. Someone very far along on the spiritual pathway would be very aware over how influential they could be. And anyone, anywhere along on the evolutionary pathway in any decent form would know that if they did do that, if they ran around mouthing off about being a fourth degree Jesus Christ crucifixion initiate, meaning claiming to be as ascended as Jesus Christ, or being a seventh degree initiate as ascended and as wise as Buddha, they wouldn't do that, because they know that that would only overly influence people and people who are very vulnerable. And an enlightened person would never do anything that would take advantage of vulnerable people. So do you see what I mean? An ascended person would have such expansive awareness and such simultaneous expansive awareness. They would be able to understand different points of view. They'd be able to understand the people that may be attracted to them and understand how to approach them, how to speak. And here's the other way you can tell without being clairvoyant, whether you're working with a decent spiritual teacher or a spiritual narcissist, because they are harmful to work with, meaning when someone's behaving and acting like that and trying to justify it and thinks it's okay and comes up with every excuse under the book to justify behavior like that. Oh, look, it's coming from such a wounded place. And even though no one's perfect and everyone always has their stuff to work through, although I'll say this much, when you're working with a proper, decent ascension technique, it becomes about refinement more than massive correction. But you're not going to learn much that's decent from a spiritual narcissist, because they're coming from such a wounded place and they really need to sort that out before continuing to inflict themselves on the public. It's really, really harmful. And if what they were teaching was so good and so wholesome, they wouldn't need to peddle themselves like that by virtue of their work. You know that line in the Bible, you shall know them by their deeds? So the quality of someone's service, the quality of someone's work would shine through enough that that would be all that would be needed. And anyone undergoing any type of proper enlightenment process would know that. And what I would also like to point out, and I'm going to finish this, I'm going to wrap this up with a very important quote from the Bailey books. So this is the other way you know someone's, now, by the way, I'll create a whole nother video over the fact that the proper deep initiations that I'm talking about, the ones given by hierarchy, birth, baptism, transfiguration, crucifixion, renunciation, these are the initiations I'm discussing, that you either receive from hierarchy or you don't. And in case anyone's interested, this is the book Initiation, Human and the Solar. Initiation, Human and the Solar by Alice A. Bailey. Spiritual insights and wisdom telepathically dictated to her by Ascended Master Dwell Cool. I'm on page 139. So in terms of rules meaning conditions, a better word would probably be conditions around proper initiation. This is one of them. There's a few of them, but this is one of them. Herein lies one of the initial tests, meaning around initiation. Herein lies one of the initial tests. The disciple's attitude of mind must be that he cares not whether he takes initiation or not. Selfish motive must not enter in. And spiritual narcissists are selfish. Do you see the paradox? Only those applications which reach the master through the energy engendered through pure altruistic motive are transmitted by him to the recording angel of hierarchy. Only those disciples who seek initiation because of the ability to bless and help people more, which you wouldn't mouth off about, to bless and help people more. It's only that type of attitude, along with other qualities, that will cause a response to receive proper initiation. Those careless of initiation receive no proper initiation, even if they delude themselves into thinking that's what's happening. Those careless of initiation receive it not. And those anxious through selfish motive or curiosity to participate in the mysteries enter not, but remain knocking outside. So in other words, if someone really was going through proper, deep initiation of the kind I'm talking about, number one, the ego would start to be absorbed and dissolve into soul fusion so much. You would never mouth off about yourself or where you are on the path or write books about, you know, who you are and what initiations you've had and what it's done for you and all of this. Because you couldn't. Because the ego would be soul dissolved and soul infused. And number two, going through any type of deep proper initiation, you would realize the transformative power of going through something like that is to help with being in service to others. It is not and is not for personal gain in a traditional sense. So I hope I've pointed out some interesting facts about what initiation is and is not. And in final words of closing, while it's up to you ultimately who you do and don't connect with in terms of being on a spiritual pathway, being taught a spiritual pathway, if you find yourself involved or confronted with somebody who's constantly talking about, I had this initiation this week and that initiation this week and this initiation this year and that initiation that, number one, that's most likely not happening for reasons I've just expressed. And number two, if they really were, they'd be soul infused, they wouldn't speak like that. And number three, the quality of someone's work would shine through enough that that wouldn't even matter. And truly enlightened people, or people on an enlightened path, that gets to a point where they actually don't care, nor should you, whether you receive initiation or not. It's not a flippant thing, nor can it be coveted or demanded or manipulated. You either receive it or you don't, by virtue of your deeds, actions, proper karmic clearing technique, how you're giving your service, selfless motive. So much goes into it. So my goodness, please, I really genuinely hope that the information I've imparted today has been insightful and helpful. And I hope it gives people a better roadmap for being discerning about what types of spiritual teachers you connect with and the types of spiritual teachers that maybe you should not be involved with. And also just given some proper insight into what proper initiation is and is not. On that note, 7 ray blessings to all.